In today's video, we are looking at Lotus. We take a look at the brand's long-running history of sports car building, the other legendary cars that they helped develop, right up to Lotus's current portfolio, which includes the 2,000 horsepower Avija hypercar and the brand's first ever SUV. Lotus was founded by keen engineer Colin Chapman, whose main interest had been motorbikes, but following World War II had set up a business selling cars. One of these cars was an Austin 7 that he modified and used for trail racing. He went on to build 3 more Austin 7 based cars for racing, and in 1952 set up the Lotus company. That same year, Lotus released their first production car, the Lotus Mark 6. Powered by a Ford 1.2 litre engine that had 50 horsepower, due to weighing little over 400 kilograms, the car was capable of nearly 100 miles an hour. By 1957, Lotus had sold roughly 110 examples. In 1957, Lotus releases the 7. Following Chapman's beliefs of performance through low weight and simplicity, the 7 was capable of hitting 60 in 6.2 seconds, despite only having a Ford 1.2 litre engine at launch. The 7 carried on until 1973. In that time, they'd built over 2,500 units when production had ended. When production ended, Caterham bought the rights to the design and has built the same model ever since, giving the design a 67-year run to date. 1958 saw Lotus release the Elite, Lotus's first model to feature a closed roof and closed wheels design. It was also the first car in the world to feature a glass fibre monocoque chassis. Power came from a 71 horsepower Coventry Climax 1200cc engine. It was capable of 112 miles an hour. In total, 998 units were built. However, due to building expenses, Lotus was losing money on every Elite that it built. 1962 saw the release of the Lotus Elan. It was simpler to build than the Elite, meaning that Lotus could return to profit. The car only weighed 640 kilograms, yet came with a 105 horsepower 1.6 litre engine. Later models were tuned to 115 horsepower and then 126 horsepower in the 1971 Sprint version. The car was hugely advanced for its time, featuring all-round independent suspension and all-round disc brakes. It was also a massive commercial success, for Lotus shifting over 22,000 in just 12 years. 1963, Ford releases a faster version of the Cortina. This was named the Ford Lotus Cortina, thanks to Lotus having helped develop the engine and suspension. Between 1966 and 1975, Lotus produced the Europa. It was Lotus's first ever mid-engined car. It was praised for its chassis and handling, but the design was controversial. It was initially powered by a Renault 16 engine, as Lotus wanted to distance itself from being so reliant on Ford parts. However, Ford engines were used in later examples. In 1974, Lotus revives the Elite name. This time, it was a distinctive, wedge-shaped 4-seater shooting brake. It was Lotus's attempt to move up market. However, the fuel and financial crisis of the 1970s stunted its sales growth, with only 2,500 being sold in 8 years. In 1969, Lotus sold 4,500 cars. By 1975, this had dropped to just 650. When the Elite went on sale, it was £5,750, making it the world's most expensive 4-cylinder car at the time, the equivalent of over £52,000 in today's money. 1976, Lotus releases the Esprit. Its first supercar, it featured a mid-engine rear-wheel drive layout. Initially, it was offered with a 160 horsepower 2 litre and featured the gearbox from a Citroën SM. In 1980, the car started being offered with a 210 horsepower turbocharged engine, allowing for the Esprit to hit 60 in just 6 seconds. From 1981, the Esprit chassis was used for the DeLorean. In 1989, the Esprit SE Turbo had 280 horsepower, allowing for 0 to 60 time of 4.7 seconds, and a top speed that exceeds 160. The final versions had a Lotus-developed twin-turbo V8 that produced 350 horsepower. Production ended in 2004, following a 28-year production run, in which time 10,500 cars were built. In 1985, Lotus helped develop the chassis for the Sinclair C5, a tiny electric vehicle designed as an alternative to a bike for use in cities. It was built in Merthyr Tydfil, Wales. The Sinclair C5 was a radical departure for Lotus, whose norm was building sports cars. In 1989, Lotus releases their first ever front-wheel drive car, the second generation Elan. Testing found that lightweight cars with under a certain amount of horsepower would always outperform their rear-wheel drive counterparts. Critics also praised the handling, describing the Elan as the fastest point-to-point car available. Production ended in 1995 when Kia bought the rights to the name and continued production in South Korea as the Kia Elan until 1999. 1990 sees Lotus help develop the Lotus Vauxhall Carlton. It used a 3.6-litre twin-turbo V6 that developed 380 horsepower and could hit 60 in 5 seconds, with a top speed of 180 miles an hour. It was the world's fastest production saloon for many years, outperforming most Aston Martins and Ferraris of the time. In 1993, a stolen Lotus Carlton conducted multiple ram raids, stealing £20,000 worth of cigarettes and alcohol, with the police quoted saying, "We simply haven't been able to get near the thing, and it looks unlikely that we ever will." The car was never recovered. Only 950 cars were ever built in 3 years. It cost £48,500 when new, roughly £120,000 in today's money. In 1996, Lotus releases the Elise, one of Lotus's best-known models. Power came from a 118 horsepower Rover K-Series engine. However, with Lotus's 725 kilogram weight, this was enough to hit 60 in under 6 seconds. In the year 2000, they released a special edition called the 340R, which had 177 horsepower and weighed little over 500 kilograms. The 340R refers to its power-to-weight ratio of 340 horsepower per tonne. In the year 2000, they also released a hardtop version called the Lotus Exige, which came with the same engine as the 340R. The top-of-the-range track-spec edition came with 190 horsepower. Also that year, the Lotus Elise-based Vauxhall VX220 and Opel Speedsters were released. The top of the range was the VXR 220, which with a turbocharger produced 220 horsepower, had a top speed of 155 miles an hour, and hit 60 in just over 4 seconds. Later models of the Elise used a supercharged 1.8-litre Toyota engine, the fastest being the Cup 260, which was faster than some supercars with a 0 to 60 time of 3.8 seconds. In 2004, Lotus helped develop the chassis for the Aston Martin DB9, and did the same thing in 2007, helping Nissan develop the Nissan GT-R. In 2008, Tesla used a Lotus Elise to develop its first ever production car, the Tesla Roadster. It had a 244-mile electric range, most of any electric car at that time. Due to the lightweight Lotus Elise underpinnings, the Roadster only weighed 1,300 kilograms, a very low weight by electric car standards, helping the Roadster hit 60 in just 3.7 seconds. By 2012, nearly 2,500 Roadsters had been built. In 2009, Lotus released the Evora, a mid-sized, mid-engine rear-wheel drive coupe, powered by a 3.5-litre supercharged Toyota engine. Lotus's first all-new car since the 1996 Elise, with a top-spec GT430 hitting 60 in 3.6 seconds and topping out at almost 200 miles an hour. In 2011, Hennessy took a Lotus Exige and fitted it with a 7-litre twin-turbo V8 that produced 1,450 brake horsepower. 13 cars were built and it had a top speed of over 270 miles an hour. It couldn't be listed in the Guinness Book of Records though, as that requires a minimum production of 30 units. In 2017, China's Geely buys out a 51% controlling stake in Lotus, and in 2021 announced that it struck a deal with Renault's Alpine to co-develop a range of electric sports cars. In 2019, the Lotus Evija is revealed, an electric hypercar with 4 electric motors, with a total output of 2,012 horsepower. The car was able to hit 190 miles an hour in just 9 seconds, and had a 217 mile an hour top speed. It cost £2.4 million to buy an Evija. Only 130 of these are going to be built, one of which has already sustained serious damage at Goodwood. In 2022, Lotus replaces the Elise, Exige and Evora with the Emira. Lotus plans on it being their last internal combustion engine car. Initially, it was powered by a 3.5-litre supercharged Toyota engine with 400 horsepower, but later it could also be had with a 360 horsepower 2-litre turbo from the Mercedes-Benz A-Class AMG. In 2022, Lotus also releases the Elytra, their first ever SUV model. It uses 2 electric motors to develop 600 horsepower in the base spec model, with the Elytra R developing 905 horsepower with a 0 to 60 time of just 2.9 seconds, making it one of the fastest SUVs on sale to date, despite being a large 5.1 metre long car that weighs over 2.5 tonnes. 2023 sees Lotus release the Emira, an electric super saloon which will rival the Mercedes EQS and Tesla Model S. It shares many parts with the Elytra, but due to the more aerodynamic shape, it can hit 60 in 2.7 seconds.